What if I told you 9 trained hikers stepped out of their tent into a -30 Siberian blizzard, barefoot, half naked, and in a perfect single-file line, like they were following something they couldn't see? Their tent was sliced open from the inside. Their bodies were scattered across a frozen slope. And the government's final explanation? An unknown compelling force. I spent days tearing through their diaries, their last photos, every autopsy, and the full declassified investigation. And the deeper you go, the less any of it makes sense. This is the Dyatlov Pass Incident, and this is the nightmare hiding inside it. It started like every great disaster starts, quietly. 10 students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, all elite hikers, all experienced in the Siberian wilderness, set out in January of 1959. Their goal: reach the mountain of Otterten and earn the highest hiking certification the Soviet Union offered. On day 2, one member, Yuri Yudin, turned back because of brutal joint pain. He was embarrassed, frustrated. He thought he was letting the group down. But that pain ended up saving his life. The last photo of him with the team still feels like a goodbye he never understood. The remaining 9, Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin, Lyudmila Dubanina, and the others, pressed forward. They battled freezing winds, deep snow, and a landscape that looked more like Mars than Earth. But they were confident. They were trained. They documented everything. Photos, laughing, dancing, building campfires, writing in diaries about the cold, but also about the joy of being young and free. Then came February 1st. That day, the weather turned vicious. Visibility dropped. The wind roared like a freight train scraping across the ridge. They were supposed to descend into the forest for shelter, but they didn't. Instead, Dyatlov made the strangest decision of the entire trip: pitched the tent on the open slope of Kolatsiakol. The local Mansi tribe had another name for that mountain: Dead Mountain. Night fell. The temperature plummeted. The wind screamed across the canvas, and whatever happened next, it hit fast. When search teams finally found the tent 3 weeks later, the sight froze them in place. The tent wasn't collapsed by snow. It wasn't torn open by animals. It was cut open from the inside. Inside the tent, everything was in place. Boots lined up, jackets folded, food set aside. But outside, 9 sets of footprints wandered calmly down the slope. Not running, not staggering, walking barefoot, walking into the dark, into the cold, into something none of them understood. The footprints stopped half a kilometer later, swallowed by snow, but the bodies told the rest of the story. The first 2 were found under a cedar tree, almost naked, skin burned. One of them had bitten off part of his own knuckle, either to stay conscious or to keep himself from screaming. The tree above them was mangled, branches broken 5 meters high. Someone climbed it. Someone tried to see something or escape something. 3 more bodies were found between the tree and the tent, frozen in positions that looked like they were crawling, fighting, or desperately trying to get back to shelter. All 3 died of hypothermia. But the remaining 4, that's where the case breaks reality. Months later, rescuers found a snow den deeper in the forest. Inside were the last 4 hikers. They were better dressed, more prepared. They had built a shelter. They tried to survive, but something hit them that no human could survive. 1 had his skull smashed open. 2 had their ribs crushed inward like a car had slammed into them. But there were no bruises on the outside of their bodies, no external trauma. Medical examiners said the force required was beyond what a human could inflict. And then there was Lyudmila. Her eyes were gone, her tongue was missing, parts of her face were missing, and there was blood in her stomach, which means she was alive when her tongue was removed. Think about that. Think about what kind of force, or creature, or event could do that in the middle of a frozen mountain. And then comes the detail that flips everything upside down. Radiation. Several pieces of clothing tested above the normal limit. Some showed levels up to 9,900 disintegrations per minute. Not enough to kill you, but way too high to ignore. Even the snow around the tent carried trace amounts. And there were the lights. Multiple groups in the area reported glowing spheres flying across the sky that same month. Soldiers, hikers, locals. One of the hikers' cameras even captured a strange bright object in the night sky, hours before they died. I'm not jumping to aliens, but I'm definitely not crossing them off the list. Over the decades, people have thrown every explanation at this case. Avalanche? No sign of one. The slope wasn't steep enough, and avalanche victims don't end up with missing tongues and car crash injuries. Mansi attack? No footprints. And the Mansi weren't violent. Animals? No tracks. And animals don't crush rib cages without touching the skin. Cold-induced delirium? Then why did they walk calmly? Why single file? Why cut open their only shelter? Then there's the Soviet cover-up theory. That one actually fits too well. Radiation, internal injuries, panic, lights in the sky. Soviet rocket tests confirmed that night, though officials deny any landed near the hikers, and the case was locked away for 3 years before details were released. But the most brutally simple explanation? A stove malfunction. Inside the tent, the group had a homemade stove. They used it that night. If the exhaust pipe was removed and embers reignited, the tent could have filled with smoke in seconds, blinding, choking, burning. They could have slashed the tent open to escape before thinking. They could have walked sideways down the slope to breathe. Once outside, with no shoes in a raging storm, they were done. But the stove theory doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain the massive internal injuries. It doesn't explain the radiation. It doesn't explain the missing tongue. It doesn't explain the lights. And it definitely doesn't explain the line printed in the final report. The cause of death was an unknown compelling force. I've read every page of this case, and here's the only truth I can give you. Something happened inside that tent. Something powerful. Something terrifying. Something that made 9 elite hikers walk willingly into their own deaths. Something that crushed bones without touching skin. Something that left radiation in the snow. Something that ripped a tongue from a living person. Something that the Soviet government never explained. Whatever happened on Dead Mountain, it wasn't normal. And we are nowhere close to knowing the full story. If you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person I make these videos for. Hit like, hit subscribe, and tell me what mystery you want next. Because next time, we're uncovering a story that might rewrite everything we think we know about ancient history.